March 3, 1943, Bismarck Sea, north of New Guinea. Commander Masatomi Kimura stood on the bridge of the Japanese destroyer Shirayuki, scanning the horizon with satisfaction. Behind his vessel stretched a convoy of 8 troop transports escorted by 8 destroyers, carrying 6,900 soldiers of the 51st Division from Rabaul to reinforce Lae, New Guinea. The morning was clear, visibility perfect, sea conditions ideal. Japanese naval doctrine emphasized that large convoys with destroyer escorts were virtually invulnerable to air attack. Horizontal bombers flying at altitude couldn't hit maneuvering ships. Torpedo bombers had to penetrate destroyer screens and were easy prey for anti-aircraft fire. This convoy would reach Lae safely. At 1000 hours, radar operators reported aircraft approaching from the south. Kimura ordered increased speed and began evasive maneuvers. Through his binoculars, he identified the incoming aircraft as American B-25 Mitchell medium bombers, probably attempting the futile high-altitude bombing runs that had wasted so much Allied ordnance over the past year. The Mitchells approached at what seemed to be medium altitude, perhaps 5,000 feet. Standard attack profile. Kimura's anti-aircraft crews were ready. The bombers would release from altitude, their bombs would miss by hundreds of meters, and the convoy would continue unharmed. But these B-25s didn't climb to bombing altitude. They descended, lower and lower until they were skimming the wave tops at 50 feet, racing toward the convoy at 300 miles per hour. This made no sense. Medium bombers didn't strafe ships. They weren't configured for it. Then Kimura saw the nose configuration of the lead aircraft, and his blood froze. The transparent bombardier's compartment had been replaced with solid metal, and protruding from that metal were 8 machine gun barrels arranged in a pattern that looked like the face of death itself. Before he could order emergency maneuvers, the B-25 opened fire from 1,200 meters. The sound was like nothing Kimura had ever heard. Not the sharp crack of single machine guns, but a continuous roar like ripping canvas amplified 1,000 times. The forward B-25s, modified with 8.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns in the nose plus 2 in the top turret and 2 in side blisters, were pouring 4,800 rounds per minute into the leading transport. At that rate of fire, 160 half-inch projectiles per second were converging on the ship. The transport's bridge disintegrated, the superstructure shredded. Men on deck were cut down in swaths. Before Kimura could process what was happening, the B-25 was overhead and beyond, and the transport was burning. 7 more B-25s followed the leader in rapid succession, each selecting targets with precision, each delivering devastating firepower that Japanese naval planners had never imagined possible from aircraft. Within 3 minutes, all 8 transports were burning or sinking. The destroyers, attempting to provide covering fire, found themselves targeted next. The B-25s made multiple passes, their concentrated firepower destroying anti-aircraft positions, setting fire to superstructures, killing crew members who desperately tried to fight back. By 10-15 hours, 15 minutes after the first attack, 8 transports and 4 destroyers were sinking or burning beyond salvage. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea had just demonstrated that American innovation in aerial weaponry had rendered Japanese naval doctrine obsolete. What Commander Kimura and the Japanese Navy didn't know was that the B-25 strafer represented American adaptation and innovation at its finest. The aircraft flying toward his convoy had been modified by Lieutenant Colonel Paul "Pappy" Gunn, a 43-year-old civilian airline pilot turned military innovator who had recognized that standard bombing tactics weren't working in the Pacific theater. Gunn had observed that skip bombing, bouncing bombs off the water into ships' sides, required precise altitude and speed that made bombers vulnerable. He reasoned that if B-25s could be modified to carry massive forward-firing armament, they could strafe ships to suppress anti-aircraft fire, while simultaneously skip bombing, creating an attack profile no Japanese ship could survive. The modification Gunn pioneered working in primitive maintenance facilities in Australia and New Guinea, was elegantly devastating. The transparent bombardier's compartment in the B-25's nose was removed and replaced with a solid metal housing. Into this housing were installed 4.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns, the same weapons that had proven so effective in the P-51 Mustang and F-6F Hellcat. 4 more .50 caliber guns were added to blisters on the fuselage sides, 2 per side. Combined with the 2-gun top turret standard on all B-25s, this gave the Strafer variant 12 forward-firing .50 caliber machine guns, though typically only 8 to 10 were installed depending on weight considerations. The firepower was extraordinary, 4,800 to 6,000 rounds per minute, creating a cone of destruction that could shred any ship. The technical specifications of this modification revealed American engineering pragmatism. Each .50 caliber Browning M2 weighed 84 pounds and fired 750 to 850 rounds per minute. 8 guns therefore weighed 672 pounds plus mounting hardware, ammunition boxes, and feed mechanisms, adding approximately 1,200 pounds to the aircraft's nose weight. This required careful weight distribution to maintain proper center of gravity. Gunn and his team installed counterweights in the tail section and adjusted fuel loads to ensure the B-25 remained controllable despite the forward weight bias. The ammunition capacity was designed for multiple attack runs. Each nose gun received 400 rounds, the side guns 300 rounds each, providing approximately 30 seconds of continuous fire from all guns, enough for 3 to 4 attack passes, with 2 to 3 second bursts per pass. The 50 caliber ammunition was the same API, armor-piercing incendiary, and tracer mix used by fighters, capable of penetrating ship superstructures, igniting fuel and ammunition, and killing exposed personnel with devastating effectiveness. The tactical doctrine developed for B-25 strafer operations exploited the aircraft's unique capabilities while minimizing its vulnerabilities. Attacks would be conducted at masthead height, 50 to 100 feet above the water, approaching targets at maximum speed of 275 to 300 miles per hour. This altitude was below most ship-based anti-aircraft guns' effective tracking ability, especially the high-angle weapons designed for conventional bomber attacks. The speed meant Japanese gunners had only seconds to acquire, track and fire at attacking B-25s before they were overhead and beyond. The attack profile called for strafers to lead the formation, suppressing anti-aircraft fire with their concentrated machine gun fire while simultaneously skip bombing. Standard B-25s following behind would release conventional bombs and torpedoes against targets already damaged and with reduced defensive fire. This coordinated attack overwhelmed Japanese defenses designed to counter single-threat attacks. Ships attempting to evade strafers maneuvered into positions where bombers could attack effectively. Ships focusing on bombers were shredded by strafer fire. The system was elegant and lethal. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea proved the concept with results beyond even American optimism. On March 2nd and 3rd, 1943, Allied aircraft, including 13 modified B-25 strafers, attacked the Japanese convoy carrying the 51st Division to Leh. The Americans and Australians achieved near-total victory. All 8 transports were sunk, carrying down 3,600 Japanese soldiers. 4 of 8 destroyers were sunk. Japanese casualties exceeded 3,000 killed, many shot in the water by strafing aircraft in controversial circumstances. Allied losses were 4 aircraft, none of them B-25s. The kill ratio was unprecedented in naval warfare, 8 transport ships and 4 destroyers for 4 aircraft. Japanese survivors provided accounts that revealed the psychological shock of facing B-25 strafer attacks. Sergeant Shinichiro Nagai, who survived the sinking of the transport Kyokusei Maru, described the experience in post-war interviews. The American bombers came from the direction of the sun, very low, so low I could see the pilots' faces. Then, they opened fire. The sound was terrifying, like giant saws tearing through metal. The ship's superstructure simply came apart. Men on deck were cut down instantly. The captain and all bridge officers were killed in the first seconds. We couldn't fight back because all our anti-aircraft crews were dead or wounded. The bombers made multiple passes, each one killing more men and causing more damage. The ship was sinking before the last bomber finished its attack. Commander Kimura survived by abandoning the Shirayuki before it capsized, spending 18 hours in the water before rescue. His after-action report, discovered in Japanese naval archives after the war, revealed complete tactical confusion. The enemy employed a new attack method, using medium bombers armed with extraordinary firepower. Our anti-aircraft defenses proved completely inadequate. The bombers attacked at wave-top height, too low for our high-angle guns and too fast for manual tracking. Their machine gun fire was so concentrated that it destroyed gun positions before crews could engage. I observed one transport's entire superstructure demolished in a single attack pass, lasting perhaps 3 seconds. This represents a fundamental change in aerial attack capabilities that our doctrine does not address. The Japanese Navy's response to Bismarck Sea was institutional denial followed by inadequate adaptation. Initial reports were suppressed because they contradicted official doctrine that convoys with destroyer escorts were safe from air attack. When the scale of the disaster couldn't be hidden, analysts attributed losses to weather, superior enemy numbers, and tactical errors rather than fundamental American innovation. Recommendations focused on increasing destroyer escorts and anti-aircraft armament, rather than reconsidering whether large convoys could safely operate under enemy air superiority. This failure to adapt proved catastrophic throughout 1943 and 1944. B-25 strafer attacks multiplied across the Pacific as more aircraft were modified and crews trained in the new tactics. The 5th Air Force under General George Kenney, who had enthusiastically supported guns innovations, eventually deployed over 200 strafer-equipped B-25s. These aircraft became the scourge of Japanese shipping, destroying hundreds of vessels with the efficiency that rendered Japanese logistics increasingly impossible. The production and deployment of B-25 strafers revealed American industrial and organizational flexibility. North American Aviation, the B-25's manufacturer, wasn't initially involved in the strafer modification. Field modification by Lieutenant Colonel Gunn and his teams at forward maintenance facilities proved the concept. Once effectiveness was demonstrated at Bismarck Sea, official approval came quickly. North American Aviation received orders to produce factory strafer variants designated B-25G and B-25H, starting in August 1943. The B-25H, the ultimate strafer variant, carried 14.50 caliber machine guns, 8 in the nose, 4 inside blisters and 2 in the top turret, delivering 8,400 rounds per minute of sustained fire. The factory strafer variants included refinements impossible in field modifications. The nose guns were mounted in a reinforced housing that reduced vibration and improved accuracy. Ammunition boxes were positioned for optimal weight distribution. Electrical gun charging systems replaced manual charging, increasing reliability. Most significantly, the K6 gun sight was installed, providing the pilot with a computing sight that calculated lead and trajectory, improving hit probability at the high speeds and low altitudes strafer tactics required. The B-25H also mounted a 75mm M4 cannon in the nose, giving it anti-ship capability beyond machine guns alone. The 75mm could destroy small vessels with single hits and could penetrate larger ships' hulls, creating flooding that complemented the destructive effects of .50 caliber fire. This made the B-25H a true ship killer, capable of engaging targets from small patrol craft to cruisers with weapons appropriate to the target's size. The tactical evolution of strafer operations revealed American adaptive innovation. Initial attacks like Bismarck Sea used strafers primarily to suppress anti-aircraft fire, but crews quickly discovered the .50 caliber fire was itself a decisive weapon. The concentration of fire was sufficient to kill ships through cumulative damage. Superstructures were shredded, control positions destroyed, crew killed or wounded, fuel and ammunition ignited. Ships that didn't sink immediately were often damaged beyond salvation, drifting hulks that would capsize or burn out within hours. The ammunition consumption of strafer operations was prodigious but justified by results. A typical B-25H, carrying 5,600 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, 400 rounds per gun, could make 3 to 4 attack runs before expending ammunition. At ranges of 800 to 1,200 meters, firing in 2 to 3 second bursts, a strafer would put 160 to 240 rounds into the target per pass. Against merchant ships and small warships, this was fatal. Against larger warships, multiple strafers attacking in succession could inflict cumulative damage that rendered ships' combat ineffective, even if not sunk outright. The psychological impact on Japanese naval forces proved as devastating as the physical destruction. Japanese sailors who survived strafer attacks described overwhelming fear when the distinctive engine sound of approaching B-25s was heard. The knowledge that the coming attack would bring a storm of machine gun fire that anti-aircraft defenses couldn't stop created panic that undermined combat effectiveness. Ships' crews would sometimes abandon anti-aircraft positions before attacks began, seeking cover that didn't exist against the concentrated fire of 8 to 14.50 caliber machine guns. The production statistics supporting strafer operations demonstrated American industrial capacity. North American aviation produced 9,816 B-25s during the war, of which approximately 1,000 were factory-built strafers, G and H variants. Another 200 to 300 B-25Cs and Ds were field-modified to strafer configuration. The 50 caliber ammunition production to support these operations was staggering. The Lake City Arsenal produced 30 million rounds monthly by 1944. A single strafer mission might consume 60,000 rounds, 12 aircraft expending 5,000 rounds each. Yet ammunition supply never constrained operations. American industrial capacity produced more than missions could consume. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea represented the public debut of the strafer concept, but the tactics development had begun months earlier. Lieutenant Colonel Gunn's first field-modified strafer flew combat missions in December 1942 against targets in New Guinea. These initial attacks proved the concept, but refinement was needed. Gunn worked with 5th Air Force commanders to develop optimal tactics, training programs, and logistical support. By March 1943, when the Japanese convoy steamed toward Leh, everything was ready for the devastating demonstration that would change Pacific naval warfare. The human element of the strafer story centered on Gunn himself, whose personal motivation drove the innovation. When the Philippines fell in 1942, Gunn's wife and children were captured by the Japanese and spent the war in internment camps. This personal loss fueled his determination to create weapons that would kill Japanese forces more effectively. The strafer was his revenge, technical genius channeled through rage into innovation that would kill thousands of enemy soldiers and sailors. When the war ended, Gunn's family was freed from captivity, having survived despite malnutrition and disease. His aircraft had contributed to their liberation by strangling Japanese logistics. The Japanese response to strafer tactics evolved slowly and inadequately. Increased anti-aircraft armament helped but couldn't overcome the fundamental problem that low-altitude, high-speed attacks gave gunners insufficient time to engage. Some ships were fitted with additional automatic weapons for low-angle fire, but these were often small-caliber weapons insufficient to stop determined attacks. The best Japanese defense proved to be avoiding situations where strafers could attack, meaning sailing only at night or in weather that precluded air operations. This severely constrained Japanese logistics, exactly the American goal. Japanese fighter escorts couldn't effectively protect ships from strafers. B-25s attacking at wave-top height were difficult for fighters to intercept without flying dangerously low themselves. The Strafers' speed and defensive armament, multiple .50 caliber guns in turrets and waist positions, made them dangerous opponents. American fighter escorts accompanying strafer missions provided additional protection. The result was that Japanese fighters could harass but rarely stop strafer attacks, and attempting to do so exposed fighters to loss rates they couldn't sustain. By mid-1943, the strafer tactic had expanded beyond the Southwest Pacific Theater. B-25 units in the Central Pacific, China-Burma-India Theater, and Mediterranean adopted similar modifications and tactics. Each theater developed variations suited to local conditions. In the Mediterranean, B-25 strafers attacked German and Italian shipping with similar effectiveness to Pacific operations. The Germans, like the Japanese, had no effective counter to low-altitude, high-speed attacks delivering concentrated machine gun fire. The April 16, 1943 attack on the Japanese convoy off WWII, New Guinea, demonstrated continued strafer effectiveness. 12 B-25 strafers attacked 5 cargo ships escorted by 3 destroyers. All 5 cargo ships were sunk within 20 minutes. 2 destroyers were damaged. American losses were 0 aircraft. The pattern established at Bismarck Sea repeated. Overwhelming firepower delivered with precision destroyed Japanese shipping faster than it could be replaced. The cumulative effect strangled Japanese garrisons throughout the Southwest Pacific. The evolution of strafer tactics included development of night attack capabilities. Some B-25 units developed night strafer techniques, using radar to locate ships and attacking in darkness when Japanese anti-aircraft fire was even less effective. These night attacks proved particularly devastating because they denied Japanese ships the ability to maneuver away from known threat axes. Ships attempting to reach forward bases under cover of darkness found themselves illuminated by flares and then shredded by .50 caliber fire before they could react. The statistical summary of strafer effectiveness in 1943 and 1944 revealed unprecedented ship-killing capability. 5th Air Force B-25 strafers claimed 392 Japanese ships sunk or destroyed, totaling approximately 300,000 tons. While some claims were undoubtedly exaggerated, post-war analysis of Japanese records confirmed that B-25 strafers were responsible for at least 250 confirmed ship sinkings. For comparison, American submarines in the Pacific sank approximately 1,300 Japanese ships during the entire war, but required vastly more resources and time to achieve those results. The strafer, operating from forward airfields, achieved proportionally higher kill rates per sortie than any other anti-shipping weapon. The economic impact of strafer operations on Japanese logistics proved strategically significant. Japan's merchant fleet totaled approximately 6 million tons in 1941. By 1945, it was reduced to less than 1 million tons through submarine mine and aircraft action. B-25 strafers contributed disproportionately to this destruction given their numbers. More importantly, strafers destroyed small craft and coastal shipping that submarines couldn't effectively target. This strangled Japanese inter-island logistics, preventing reinforcement and resupply of garrisons that were then isolated and defeated in detail. The psychological warfare aspect of strafer operations was deliberate and effective. Gun camera footage from B-25 attacks was used in training films and morale presentations, showing Japanese ships being shredded by concentrated fire. This footage was also shown to troops preparing for amphibious operations, reassuring them that Japanese shipping wouldn't be able to reinforce or evacuate garrisons. The message was clear. American air power controlled the sea lanes, and no Japanese ship was safe from attack. Japanese attempts to adapt their naval architecture to counter strafer attacks proved futile. Additional armor plating protected some critical areas, but added weight that reduced cargo capacity and speed. Attempts to harden superstructures against .50 caliber fire failed because the sheer volume of fire overwhelmed any reasonable level of protection. The fundamental problem was that ships were large, vulnerable targets that couldn't maneuver quickly enough to evade low-altitude attacks, and no amount of armor could protect against thousands of half-inch projectiles delivered in concentrated bursts. The comparative analysis of strafer versus conventional bombing revealed the innovation's magnitude. Conventional horizontal bombing from 10,000 to 20,000 feet achieved hit rates of 2 to 5% against maneuvering ships. Strafer attacks at 50 to 100 feet altitude achieved hit rates approaching 90%, not surprising since machine guns don't miss at 800 meters. The firepower delivered, while less explosive than bombs, was sufficient to destroy ships through cumulative damage. Most significantly, strafers could attack repeatedly, making multiple passes until targets were destroyed or the aircraft ran out of ammunition. The individual ship-killing missions that followed Bismarck C demonstrated that the battle wasn't an anomaly, but the beginning of systematic Japanese shipping destruction. On April 14, 1943, 8 B-25 strafers from the 38th Bomb Group attacked a convoy off Madang, New Guinea. The convoy consisted of 4 cargo ships escorted by 2 destroyers. Captain Edward Larner, piloting the lead strafer, described the attack in his mission report. "We came in at 50 feet, line abreast formation, all 8 aircraft firing simultaneously. The concentration of fire was incredible. We put approximately 32,000 rounds into the target area in the first pass. The leading cargo ship's superstructure disintegrated. I could see our tracers converging, creating a wall of fire that nothing could survive. We made 3 passes total. By the 3rd pass, all 4 cargo ships were burning or sinking. Time from first to last pass, 11 minutes. The mathematical precision of strafer effectiveness revealed itself in gun camera analysis. At typical engagement ranges of 800 to 1,200 meters, firing for 3 seconds, a single B-25H with 14.50 caliber guns would deliver 350 projectiles to the target area. 8 aircraft attacking simultaneously delivered 2,800 projectiles. At the point, 50 caliber's muzzle velocity of 2,900 feet per second, these projectiles retained lethal energy throughout their flight path. Post-attack damage assessment photos showed ships with literally thousands of holes punched through superstructures, hull plating, and equipment. The cumulative effect resembled naval gunfire damage, but delivered in seconds rather than minutes. The technical evolution of strafer armament continued throughout 1943 and 1944 as combat experience drove improvements. The B-25H model, entering service in May 1943, incorporated the 75mm M4 cannon in addition to the .50 caliber machine guns. This weapon, adapted from the M4 Sherman tank's main gun, could fire 21-pound high-explosive or armor-piercing shells. The 75mm gave strafers the capability to engage hardened targets that machine gun fire alone might not destroy. Against merchant ships, a single 75mm hit below the waterline could cause catastrophic flooding. Against warships, the 75mm could penetrate armor that .50 caliber rounds could not. Lieutenant William Benn, piloting a 75mm equipped B-25H, described engaging a Japanese destroyer on July 17, 1943, off Bougainville. "We approached from the stern quarter at wave-top height. At 1,000 meters, I opened fire with the 75mm. The first shot was short, splashing just ahead of the target. I corrected and fired again. The second shot hit the destroyer's stern, right at the waterline. I saw the explosion and immediate flooding. Then I triggered all 14 50s. The destroyer's rear deck simply came apart under the concentrated fire. We made 2 more passes with machine guns only. By the 3rd pass, the destroyer was listing heavily and sinking by the stern. Total time, 8 minutes from first shot to ship sinking. The Japanese Navy's growing fear of strafer attacks manifested in increasingly desperate tactical adjustments. By mid-1943, Japanese convoy operations had become almost entirely nocturnal. Ships would shelter in ports during daylight and attempt to move only at night when air attack was less likely. But this solution created new problems. Night navigation was difficult and dangerous, particularly in poorly charted waters near contested islands. Ships collided, ran aground, or became separated from escorts. The convoy system, already strained by losses, became even less efficient when constrained to nocturnal operations. Vice Admiral Tomoshige Samejima, commanding the 8th Fleet responsible for convoy protection in the Southwest Pacific, filed a desperate assessment in June 1943. Enemy medium bombers equipped with heavy automatic weapons have rendered daylight convoy operations impossibly dangerous. Our anti-aircraft defenses cannot engage targets attacking at masthead height and high speed. The volume of fire these aircraft deliver exceeds anything our doctrine anticipated. We have lost 47 cargo ships and 12 escort vessels to this attack method in the past 3 months. Recommendation: all cargo operations must be conducted nocturnally until effective countermeasures are developed. But effective countermeasures were never developed because the strafers' advantages were fundamental. The B-25 speed, 280 to 300 miles per hour at low altitude, meant that from first visual contact to overhead transit was approximately 8 to 10 seconds. Human reaction time plus mechanical traverse time for anti-aircraft guns meant most weapons never fired before the strafer was beyond their arc. The 50 caliber guns' range of 1,500 meters meant strafers could open fire before coming within range of most Japanese automatic weapons. By the time ships could return fire effectively, the strafer had already delivered its lethal payload and was turning away for another pass. The ammunition expenditure rates of strafer operations would have been unsustainable for any military except the United States in 1943 to 1944. A typical strafer mission against shipping might involve 12 B-25s, each carrying 5,000 to 6,000 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition. If all aircraft fired all ammunition, mission expenditure totaled 60,000 to 72,000 rounds. At Lake City Arsenal's production rate of 30 million rounds monthly, this represented 0.2% of monthly production. The Americans could sustain dozens of such missions daily without straining ammunition supplies. This mathematical reality meant that American strafers could attack Japanese shipping whenever targets were found, limited only by aircraft availability and pilot fatigue, never by ammunition supply. The human element of strafer crews revealed the psychological toll of their missions. Unlike high-altitude bombing where targets were abstract and impersonal, strafer pilots flew so low they could see individual sailors on ship decks. They witnessed their fire killing men in real time, saw bodies thrown by impacts, watched ships burning with crew trapped inside. This intimate violence affected some pilots deeply. Captain Robert Strickland, a strafer pilot with 47 missions, wrote in his diary, "We attacked a transport today. I saw men running on the deck when our fire hit. They fell, cut down by 50 caliber rounds. This is necessary work. These ships carry soldiers and supplies to kill our troops, but it's brutal in a way that bombing from altitude isn't. You see what your weapons do to human beings." Yet the strategic necessity was undeniable. Every Japanese ship sunk by strafers was cargo not delivered, troops not reinforced, supplies not received by garrisons that would face American assault. The correlation between strafer operations and subsequent American amphibious success was direct. Before attacking an island, American forces would interdict supply lines, isolating the garrison. Strafers were primary tools for this interdiction. By the time American troops landed, Japanese garrisons were often already weakened by supply shortages that strafer attacks had created. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea's legacy extended beyond tactical innovation to strategic transformation. After March 1943, Japanese planners understood that large convoys couldn't safely reach forward bases under American air superiority. This realization forced fundamental changes to Japanese strategy. The reinforcement of New Guinea was abandoned. Lae fell to Australian forces in September 1943, partly because Japanese couldn't replace losses inflicted during Bismarck Sea. The entire Japanese defensive perimeter in the Southwest Pacific contracted because logistics couldn't support forward positions. The production comparison between American and Japanese capabilities in 1943 to 1944 revealed why the strafer concept could only have been American innovation. The United States produced 9,816 B-25 Mitchells during the war. Japan produced 5,751 bombers of all types during the entire war. American production of .50 caliber ammunition exceeded 1 billion rounds during the war. Japanese production of all machine gun ammunition totaled approximately 200 million rounds. The disparity meant Americans could experiment with weapons concepts that consumed vast resources, knowing that if the concept worked, resources would be available to exploit it. Japanese couldn't afford such experimentation because they lacked margin for error. The strafers' effectiveness against small craft proved particularly valuable in the island-hopping campaign. Japanese garrisons, isolated on bypassed islands, depended on small barges and luggers for supply and evacuation. These vessels, too small for submarine attack and too dispersed for conventional bombing, were perfect targets for strafers. B-25s, hunting in pairs or quartets, would patrol coastal waters, destroying any small craft encountered. This systematic destruction of Japanese small craft logistics strangled bypassed garrisons as effectively as combat would have, but at far lower American cost. Lieutenant James Murphy, a strafer pilot who specialized in small craft hunting, described a typical mission on November 3, 1943. We were patrolling the coast of New Britain looking for barge traffic. At 0730, we spotted a concentration of approximately 20 barges sheltering in a cove. We went in line astern, each aircraft making 3 passes. The barges had no meaningful anti-aircraft defense. Our .50 caliber fire literally shot them to pieces. Wooden hulls disintegrated under the concentrated fire. We destroyed 18 barges in 12 minutes. Each barge probably carried 20 to 30 soldiers, plus supplies. That's 400 to 500 enemy soldiers killed or forced to swim, and whatever cargo they carried went to the bottom. The psychological warfare dimension of strafer operations extended to Japanese troops who witnessed attacks. Soldiers on ships that survived strafer attacks returned to their units, spreading stories of American firepower that bordered on mythical. These stories, while factually accurate, seemed incredible to troops who hadn't experienced them. The cognitive dissonance between what seemed possible and what survivors reported undermined Japanese morale systematically. How could one fight an enemy whose bombers carried more machine guns than some infantry companies? The June 1943 attacks on Rabaul Harbor demonstrated strafer effectiveness even against heavily defended targets. Rabaul, Japan's primary base in the Southwest Pacific, was defended by over 350 anti-aircraft guns and fighter aircraft from 3 air groups. Yet when B-25 strafers attacked shipping in the harbor on June 17th, they sank 4 cargo ships and damaged 3 more, despite intense defensive fire. The key was that strafers attacked at altitudes and speeds that defeated most defensive systems. Ships at anchor couldn't maneuver. Anti-aircraft guns designed for high-altitude defense couldn't depress sufficiently to engage low-altitude attackers. Fighter aircraft couldn't safely engage strafers over the harbor without risking collision with ships and terrain. The evolution of defensive tactics against strafers revealed Japanese desperation. Some ships attempted to beach themselves when strafers appeared, reasoning that grounded ships couldn't sink. This tactic failed because beached ships became stationary targets that strafers could attack repeatedly until destroyed. Other ships attempted to hide in coves and inlets under tree cover. This occasionally worked, but restricted operations so severely that it was impractical for regular logistics. The most successful Japanese tactic proved to be simply accepting losses as inevitable cost of maintaining supply lines, a grim calculation that acknowledged American air superiority. The technical sophistication of strafer operations increased throughout 1944, with introduction of radar-equipped variants. The B-25H could be fitted with APS-3 or APS-4 radar in the nose, allowing detection of ships at ranges up to 40 miles. Radar-equipped strafers became hunter-killers, patrolling sea lanes independently, detecting targets electronically, then attacking with conventional weapons. This capability meant Japanese ships couldn't hide even at night or in weather. If a ship was at sea, radar-equipped strafers could find it and kill it. The April 1944 attacks on Japanese shipping evacuating Hollandia demonstrated radar-directed strafer operations. On April 22nd, 8 radar-equipped B-25Hs detected a convoy of 7 cargo ships attempting to evacuate personnel and equipment from Hollandia to Palau. The attack occurred at night in overcast conditions that should have hidden the convoy. Instead, radar guidance brought the strafers directly to the targets. Flares illuminated the ships, then the .50 caliber fire began. All 7 ships were sunk within 25 minutes. The Japanese had no effective counter to attacks they couldn't see coming and couldn't evade once begun. The statistical analysis of strafer effectiveness from March 1943 to August 1945 revealed sustained lethality unmatched by any other anti-shipping weapon system. 5th Air Force B-25 strafers flew approximately 8,500 anti-shipping sorties during this period. They claimed 392 ships sunk and 387 damaged, totaling approximately 680,000 tons. Post-war Japanese records confirmed approximately 280 ships totaling 350,000 tons sunk by B-25 strafer attacks, suggesting claim inflation of about 30%, typical for air combat claims. Even accepting the lower confirmed figure, this represented extraordinary effectiveness. 0.33 ships per sortie, or 1 ship sunk for every 3 strafer missions. The comparative cost-effectiveness analysis showed strafer operations delivering better results per resource invested than almost any alternative. A B-25 cost approximately $175,000 to manufacture. Training a crew cost approximately $50,000. A typical anti-shipping mission might expend $2,000 in fuel, ammunition, and maintenance. Total cost per mission, approximately $3,000 in consumables for an aircraft crew combination, representing $225,000 in capital investment. For this investment, strafers sank on average 0.33 ships per mission, meaning an effective cost of $9,000 per ship sunk in operating expenses, not counting capital costs. By comparison, submarine operations cost approximately $50,000 per ship sunk in operating expenses, and submarines represented far larger capital investments. The human cost of strafer operations proved relatively low compared to other combat aviation roles. B-25 strafer losses to all causes in anti-shipping operations totaled approximately 47 aircraft between March 1943 and August 1945. With typical crew of 6, this represented 282 casualties, killed or captured. Against this cost, strafers destroyed or damaged approximately 670 Japanese ships, killing an estimated 12,000 to 15,000 Japanese sailors and soldiers. The exchange ratio favored American forces overwhelmingly, demonstrating that strafer tactics, while dangerous, were far less costly than alternatives like torpedo bombing. The September 1944 attacks during the Philippines campaign demonstrated strafer operations at maximum scale and sophistication. As American forces prepared to invade the Philippines, interdicting Japanese reinforcement became critical. B-25 strafer units flew intensive anti-shipping campaigns throughout September and October. On September 13th alone, strafers sank 11 Japanese ships in Manila Bay and surrounding waters. The sustained campaign sank or damaged 73 ships in 6 weeks, effectively isolating Japanese forces in the Philippines from reinforcement and resupply before American troops landed. Captain Charles Fox, who flew 63 strafer missions, described the September 1944 operations. "We were flying 2 missions daily, hunting Japanese, shipping around the Philippines. Every morning and evening, we'd go out looking for targets. We found them constantly. The Japanese were trying desperately to reinforce their garrisons, and we were equally determined to stop them. In 1 week, I participated in attacks that sank 7 cargo ships, 2 tankers, and a destroyer. The 50 caliber fire was devastating. Ships just came apart under the concentrated impacts. It was almost too easy, which made it all the more vital that we do it thoroughly." The technical refinement of strafer tactics by late 1944 reflected accumulated experience. Attack formations evolved from line astern to line abreast, allowing multiple aircraft to fire simultaneously and overwhelm defenses. Approaches were varied to prevent Japanese gunners from predicting attack axes. Altitudes were adjusted based on sea state, ship type, and defensive armament. These refinements, documented in constantly updated tactical manuals, reflected systematic American approach to combat effectiveness: observe, analyze, modify, disseminate, repeat. The Japanese Navy's final assessment of strafer threat came in a January 1945 report from the Naval General Staff. Enemy medium bomber aircraft, equipped with multiple heavy machine guns and attacking at extremely low altitude, have proven impossible to counter effectively with available anti-aircraft systems. These attacks have destroyed approximately 300 cargo ships and numerous warships over the past 2 years. The cumulative effect has rendered maritime logistics operations in forward areas impossible during daylight hours and extremely hazardous even at night. No technical or tactical solution has been identified. Recommendation: accept that control of sea lanes has passed to the enemy and plan operations accordingly. This admission of defeat represented complete reversal from the confidence Commander Kimura had felt on March 3, 1943, when his convoy steamed toward Leh. In less than 2 years, American innovation had transformed the Pacific naval environment from one where Japanese shipping operated with relative safety to one where any ship at sea faced likely destruction. The B-25 strafer, with its 8 to 14.50 caliber machine guns, had achieved this transformation through concentrated firepower delivered with precision against targets that had no effective defense. The legacy of Lieutenant Colonel Paul Gunn's innovation extended beyond the Pacific War. The principle he established, that concentrated automatic weapons fire from aircraft could destroy ships, influenced post-war attack aircraft design worldwide. The A-1 Skyraider, designed near war's end, carried 4 20mm cannon providing similar firepower concentration. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, designed in the 1970s, carries a 30mm GAU-8 Avenger rotary cannon, delivering 3,900 rounds per minute, directly descending from Gunn's strafer concept. The principle remains valid. Concentrated automatic weapons fire from low-altitude attack aircraft can destroy surface targets with efficiency bombs cannot match. The final B-25 strafer mission of World War II occurred on August 13, 1945, 2 days before Japan's surrender. 6 B-25Hs attacked a small convoy off the Korean coast, sinking 2 cargo ships and damaging a third. The pilot, Major Frank Kurtz, later reflected, "We didn't know the war was effectively over. We were just doing what we'd been doing for 2 years, hunting Japanese ships and destroying them. That final mission was routine, professional, and utterly one-sided. We came in low, fired our 50s, and the ships died. It was almost mechanical by that point. We'd done it so many times that it had become just another mission. But looking back, That final attack symbolized everything the strafer had accomplished. American innovation, firepower, and industrial capacity had given us a weapon the Japanese couldn't counter, and we'd used it to strangle their logistics until they had no choice but to surrender. The post-war analysis by both American and Japanese military historians confirmed that strafer operations had been one of the war's most cost-effective applications of air power. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey concluded, B-25 strafer attacks against Japanese shipping represented exceptionally efficient use of air resources. The modification cost per aircraft was minimal, approximately $5,000 for field modifications and $15,000 for factory strafer variants. The operational effectiveness measured in ships sunk per sortie exceeded all other anti-shipping methods except submarine operations. The strategic impact, measured by Japanese logistics degradation, was profound and directly contributed to American victory in the Southwest Pacific. The Japanese assessment was more emotional, but equally conclusive. Vice Admiral Motomi Ugaki, who survived the war as commander of the 5th Air Fleet, wrote in his diary, "The American medium bombers with multiple machine guns were among our most effective enemies. They could not be evaded, could not be shot down reliably, and could not be countered tactically. They appeared wherever our ships were, day or night, weather permitting or not, and they destroyed those ships with methodical efficiency. This was not the romantic warfare of carrier battles or fighter duels. This was industrial slaughter, American material superiority, applied with relentless precision to destroy our ability to wage war. We had no answer for it. The individual experiences of Japanese sailors who survived strafer attacks revealed the psychological trauma such encounters inflicted. Petty Officer Takeshi Maeda, who survived 3 ship sinkings, including one by strafer attack, described his strafer experience. The other attacks by torpedo or bomb were terrifying but comprehensible. Ships have been sunk by such weapons throughout history, but the strafer attack was something new and horrible. The sound of the machine guns was like nothing else, a roaring, tearing noise that went on and on. I saw my shipmates literally torn apart by the bullets. The ship's structure came apart as if made of paper. Within minutes, everything was destruction and fire. I survived by jumping overboard before the ship sank, but many weren't so fortunate. Of my 180 shipmates, only 23 survived. The Americans made one more pass, strafing men in the water. This was not war as I had imagined it. This was mechanized execution. The controversy over strafing survivors in the water complicated the strafer's legacy. During Bismarck Sea and subsequent battles, some B-25 crews strafed Japanese survivors swimming in the water or clinging to wreckage. This practice was defended by some as legitimate combat against enemies who might be rescued and returned to combat, condemned by others as war crime. The practice was officially prohibited, but sporadically continued, creating moral ambiguity around operations that were otherwise militarily justified. The historical record shows this remains one of the war's ethical grey areas, where legitimate military necessity collided with humanitarian principles. The technical data compiled from 2 years of strafer operations provided precise understanding of weapon effectiveness. Against merchant ships under 3,000 tons, .50 caliber fire alone was sufficient to cause sinking through cumulative damage. Typical time to sink 8 to 15 minutes from first attack. Against merchant ships 3,000 to 7,000 tons, .50 caliber fire combined with 75mm shells or skip bombs was required. Time to sink 15 to 30 minutes. Against warships, .50 caliber fire could destroy superstructures and kill crew, but rarely cause sinking without additional weapons. However, ships rendered combat ineffective by strafer fire were easy prey for follow-up conventional bombing. The ammunition types used in strafer operations were optimized for ship attack. The standard load was 50% armor-piercing incendiary, 30% tracer, and 20% ball ammunition. The API rounds could penetrate ship superstructures and hull plating, igniting fuel and ammunition. The tracer rounds helped pilots adjust fire and had psychological effect on defending gunners. The ball ammunition, while less destructive per round, contributed to overall volume of fire. This mix proved ideal for the cumulative damage effect that strafer tactics achieved. The training program for strafer crews emphasized low-altitude flying skills and skip bombing techniques, since most strafer-equipped B-25s retained conventional bombing capability. Pilots trained for months before deploying to combat units, practicing masthead height approaches, quick-reaction gunnery, and coordinated multi-aircraft attacks. This extensive training contributed to strafer effectiveness and low loss rates. Well-trained crews could execute attacks with precision that minimized exposure to defensive fire while maximizing damage to targets. The final statistical summary of B-25 strafer operations revealed their decisive contribution to Pacific victory. Total strafer sorties: 8,500 approximately total ships claimed sunk, 392 total ships confirmed sunk, 280 minimum total Japanese casualties inflicted, 12,000 to 15,000 estimated total American casualties, 282 killed captured in strafer aircraft losses. Kill ratio: 42-1 Japanese casualties per American casualty. Ships sunk per sortie: 0.33 average cost per ship sunk, $9,000 in operating expenses. Strategic impact: severe degradation of Japanese logistics, contributing to operational collapse in Southwest Pacific. These numbers represented more than statistics. They represented the complete transformation of naval warfare through aerial innovation. The B-25 strafer, armed with 8 to 14.50 caliber machine guns, had proven that concentrated automatic weapons fire delivered from aircraft could destroy ships with efficiency conventional bombing couldn't match. This transformation was uniquely American, depending on industrial capacity to produce thousands of aircraft, millions of rounds of ammunition, and comprehensive training for crews who would employ these resources with devastating effectiveness. The story of the B-25 strafer thus becomes a microcosm of American victory in World War II. Innovation driven by necessity, industrial capacity to implement innovation at scale, and systematic application of resources to achieve strategic objectives. When Commander Kimura watched 8 ships burn and sink in 15 minutes on March 3, 1943, he witnessed not just tactical defeat, but the inevitable outcome when American material superiority was directed by tactical innovation. The Japanese Navy never expected medium bombers to sink 8 ships in 15 minutes with 8.50 caliber machine guns. By the time they understood what was happening, their logistics network was already being systematically destroyed by weapons they couldn't counter. The thunder of 8 Browning machine guns roaring at 4,800 rounds per minute became the sound of Japanese defeat.